Chapter 11. Life and the Doctor. I will make a man more precious than fine gold. My hospital grew on me as I came to know it better. Everything in it and about it began to interest me profoundly. I learned through books and in bits of conversation the story of the man who gave the money to found it. His portrait hangs there in the anteroom, a bluff businessman, one of those Americans who insisted upon his practicality and wrote his poetry in brick and mortar. At the main entrance to the vast building there stands, without warning or explanation, a colossal statue of the Christ, his hands outspread in welcome. Strange in that busy place, a personality as disturbing as ever to the spirit of man. On the pedestal, these words are engraved. Come unto me, all ye that labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. I liked to watch the busy crowd swirling by in the passageways, pale new patients coming in, smiling patients going out, visitors to see the sick, hurrying doctors and nurses, few looking up as they went by. I thought of another line that might well be placed upon the pedestal. Is it nothing to you, all ye that pass by? There were also the great doctors, the great men who created the living hospital within its shell of brick and mortar, and by their genius made it famous. I had their books, one by one, and read deeply into their hopes and their aspirations, felt their passion for truth, was convinced by their practical sense. I was full of admiration. One of the greatest of them knew as much of the human spirit as of the human body. It seemed to me, indeed, the more I saw and learned and felt, that of all institutions in this world, the hospital, at this moment of time, is supreme. It represents modern man at his best. It is the most objective and dispassionate in confronting the problems of life, the least controlled by prejudices or traditions or taboos. As I thought of it, it seemed to me far more vitally in contact with reality, more definite in its purpose, and therefore more effective as an institution than the church, the school, the Senate. Here, I thought, a man's a man for a that. He is accepted without regard to class or race or creed or sex. In the ward where I lay, during many weeks of my sojourn, I had for neighbours a Justice of the United States Supreme Court, a United States Senator, the President-elect of a Latin American Republic, and a miscellaneous assortment of the rich and notable of the earth, all looking much alike in their hospital slips. Down the corridor a little way, there opened the vast wards where lay the utterly poor and neglected of that city, the poorest white people, the poorest foreigners, the poorest Negroes. So far as the essentials of medical attention were concerned, they enjoyed exactly the same treatment as the senators and the millionaires. A little less room, perhaps, in the public wards, and simpler food, but the same exactitude of scientific care by doctors and nurses. A black-hearted criminal, if he comes to the hospital shot through, is cared for and cured. He has the same attention as a saint might have, and no questions asked about either. After I was able to make little venturesome excursions through the mazes of that endless institution, I walked one evening into the Negro ward. Every bed was filled. Everywhere I looked, there was cleanliness and order, and busy nurses and doctors. Some of these, poor of the earth, even though ill, were probably warmer, cleaner, better fed, more comfortably housed than ever before in their lives. It was just at their supper time, and the orderlies were trundling in the steaming service tables. One old coloured man with kinky grey hair, propped up in bed, eating his supper, looked so happy that I spoke to him. "These folks," he responded, "am surely the messengers of the Lord." A little later, coming back slowly along the corridor, I heard strange sounds in that place. I stopped at the entrance of the passageway that led down into the Negro ward. They had finished their supper and had broken irresistibly into song. This was the refrain. Oh, I know, the Lord has laid his hands on me. Standing there, listening, I could not keep the mist out of my eyes. Yes, the colour of men still divides them, and their religions divide them, and their languages and their nations and their parties. But this great ship of souls accepts them all, carries them all onward together to their destination, steerage, third class and first. Only one question is asked of any man. Do you suffer? We are all one in pain. If it was the conviction of the preciousness of the soul of man that built the cathedral at Chartres, it is the conviction of the preciousness of his life that has built the matchless hospitals of America. As I thought of it, those long days, it seemed to me that the hospital cherishes a spirit or an attitude that the church sadly lacks. I felt in it a respect for the human body and for human life beyond that in the church, as it stands today for the spirit of man. The hospital diagnoses before it prescribes. The church prescribes before it diagnoses. The physician stands humble before the human body, studies it, doubts about it, wonders at it, labours to fit his remedies to the exact disease. Is there in any church an equivalent humility in the presence of the spirit of man? Is the priest willing to inquire and doubt and wonder? Does he know before he tries to cure? Must the church cultivate certainty, lest knowledge turn and rend it? Once, the physician let blood indiscriminately for almost every ill. Has the church, in its treatment of souls, passed that stage in its development? And where, in any religious institution, is there such singleness of purpose, such objectivity of aim, as in the hospital? And yet, having said all these things about the hospital, and truly said, for they are based upon what I myself saw and heard and thought, I have yet to speak of a limitation I felt deeply during the weeks I spent there. One of the vivid lesser characters that Shakespeare drew with such penetrating art was a doctor. I thought often, while in the hospital, of that nameless doctor in Macbeth. It is after the murder, and Lady Macbeth walks in her restless sleep. The doctor comes bustling in, all doctor, inquiring of the nurse. When was it she last walked? He is eager for all the facts before he makes his diagnosis. And then, you will remember, Lady Macbeth enters, in that scene that freezes the blood. She is washing her hands. Out, damn spot, out, I say! All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. Oh, oh, oh! Faced with this appalling spectacle, the boundless agony of the soul, the doctor rises suddenly out of his profession, realizes that here are matters too great for him. This disease, he says, is beyond my practice. He watches the rising terror of the distraught queen. There's knocking at the gate! And, out of his deep understanding as a man, he says, more needs she the divine than the physician. It seemed to me, I may be wrong, that it is too rarely that the modern doctor, equipped with his myriad instruments, is willing to say, this disease is beyond my practice, and more rarely still, more needs she the divine than the physician. When I thought, after 8 doctors had weighed and tested and x-rayed every part of me, how little, after all, they knew of me, it came to me with extraordinary force the vast ranges of human suffering, suffering that reacts upon the body, that is beyond the practice of the doctor. They try, humbly enough, to get inside the mind of the patient, but something fails in their art. Something else is needed, some deeper, humbler understanding of the human spirit. There are such depths of human life that the photograph never catches. Nearly all that is important or uniquely interesting about man begins, as Matthew Arnold once said, where nature ends. It is relatively easy to observe and explain and treat the physical reactions of humankind, for they are the common reactions of all animals and make up, indeed, a large part of life. But it is the plane that lies above all this, however profoundly affected by it, that so intensely matters. We are all alike as animals. We are all different as human beings. In the slight margin by which man lifts his head above the universal slime and thinks lies all the interest and beauty of life. Likewise, all the tragedy and sorrow and joy. What it seemed to me I wanted passionately in that hospital was not merely a cure for my defective body, but a way to live with tranquility in a troubled world of which my body was the apt symbol. And where is that to be had? In all its vast array of medical lore, or among its most skillful physicians. All my meditations brought me back inevitably to the conclusion of the early weeks in the gabled room. A man, after all, cures himself. It is only as he comes to his own aid, takes possession of his own spirit, that he recovers. Today, I have got out of all trouble, or rather, I have cast out all trouble, for it was not outside, but within. As I look back upon it, I can say honestly that my experience in the hospital, miserable as it seemed at the time, was among the most interesting of my life.